بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد سيد الأولين والآخرين وحبيب رب العالمين. Make our intentions sincerely for the sake of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We were speaking last time about the two types of verses in Al-Quran, the muhkam verses and the mutashabih verses. And we were focusing on the people that liken Allah to the creation, those literalists who recite the Quran and give it a literal meaning. These people in the past were known as al-mujassima, and also they are known as, in Arabic, as al-hashawiyya, or we also call them al-hashwiyya. Now, the scholars, they wrote about these types of people a lot in their books. The people nowadays that we know as al-mujassima are al-wahhabiyya, but they were not the first type of mujassim. They were not the first group of people to ever say that Allah is a body, or to imply that Allah is in a place, or that He is weak, or that He is limited, and so on. One of the scholars in the past, and his name is Sheikh Muhammad al-Arabi. He was from Algeria. He was Jazairi. He died in the year 1970. He was born approximately in the year 1900. And he was someone who used to teach in Mecca, in Al-Masjid al-Haram. And he met on many occasions our Sheikh Abdullah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, but he was not one from whom a Sheikh took knowledge. Sheikh Abdullah did not study with him, and likewise Sheikh Abdullah didn't hear knowledge from him. Rather, they met on many occasions. Because he lived for a period of time in Mecca, Sheikh Muhammad al-Arabi was someone who saw very clearly what the Wahhabiyya were doing in Mecca and in Al-Madinah. And he saw that they were sourcing their beliefs from Ibn Taymiyyah, who lived maybe 500 or 600 years before that time, and likewise from Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who lived closer to that time. They were taking their beliefs from these people, and they were at the same time very actively attacking Ahlus Sunnah, who are al-Asha'ira and al-Maturidiyya. The Maturidis and likewise the Ash'aris. So this sheikh, this scholar, he authored a book, and he wrote it under his pen name, not his actual name, for many reasons. But then it transpired that he is the one writing it. He named his book Bara'atul Ash'ariyin, literally the innocence of the Ash'aris. Bara'atul Ash'ariyin min aqa'idil mukhalifin, from the beliefs of those that oppose the Asha'ira. And he mentioned some very interesting things. He wrote this under his pen name, Abu Hamid ibn Marzuq, or Abu Hamid ibn Marzuq. And it is in 2 volumes. And I thought that it would be beneficial just to read through some of what he mentions. And he mentions what we're going to go on to mention also. He says that the belief of those that follow Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab about Allah is that they attribute having a body to Allah. وَهُوَ مُقَلِّدٌ فِيهِ, and in that he is following someone by the name of Abu al-Abbas Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah. وَهَذَا مُقَلِّدٌ فِيهِ الْكَرَّامِيَّةِ, and Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah, who lived about 500 or 600 years before that, was following al-Karramiyyah وَمُجَسِّمَةُ الْحَنَابِلَةِ. So you have the Shafi'is, Malikis, Hanafis, Hanbalis. The Hanbalis, who are from Ahl Sunnah, what happened to them was a lot of confusion occurred, and they didn't understand many statements of Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal when he mentioned them. And also, we're going to go on to mention Muhammad ibn Karram and what the author actually writes about Muhammad ibn Karram, and how he, under the guise of being a Hanbali, under the disguise of being a Hanbali, took many people astray. And that's why nowadays some of the Wahhabiyah, those who follow a madhab, because not all of them follow a madhab. Some just say Al-Quran was Sunnah. Al-Quran was Sunnah. They don't acknowledge the Shafi'i school, the Hanafi school. They don't acknowledge it. These are some of the so-called Salafis nowadays. Some of them, however, they believe that they say they follow the Hanbali school with Ibn Taymiyyah as their leader in creed. So the reason why they chose the Hanbali school is because they believe that Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he believed that Allah is a body. So the author, he mentions that these people لا يصرحون به, they don't explicitly say that we believe Allah is a body. They don't explicitly say, yes, we believe that Allah has human attributes. No. Rather, they say statements that allude towards it. The author says, وَقَدْ صَرَّحَ بِهِ ابْنُ تَيْمِيَّةَ مَرَّةً عَلَى مِنْبَرِ دِمَشْقِ الشَّامِ. That on one occasion, Ibn Taymiyyah, he explicitly mentioned this creed of believing Allah is a jism on the platform, on the pulpit, on the mimbar of Dimashq al-Sham in Damascus. فَقَالَ يَنْزِلُ كَنُزُولِ هَذَا وَنَزَلَ دَرَجَةً مِنَ الْمِنْبَرِ. That he was in Damascus, he was giving a speech, and he said, yanzilu, that Allah yanzilu, and what he means is that Allah comes down. So he said, وَالْعَيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, yanzilu كَنُزُولِ هَذَا, Allah comes down like my coming down. And then he came down one step on the mimbar. You know, like some of the mimbars you see, especially the Ottoman ones, they have many steps. So he said that, he said, yanzil كَنُزُولِ هَذَا, Allah descends supposedly like I am descending, and he came down one step. وَالْعَيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. وممن شاهد هذه القضية منه الفقيه الرحالة ابن بطوطة المغربي. And among those that witnessed him saying this was the famous Ibn Battuta. ولكنهم يدندنون حوله ويلوكونه دائما بهذه الألفاظ. They don't explicitly say nowadays that he is he literally comes down. Rather, they decorate or they hide, they disguise their belief by saying في السماء, في السماء, according to certain words of certain hadiths, that they say في السماء, which literally means in the sky. Or they'll say فوق سبع سماواته, above 7 skies. أو على عرشه. So they're taking ayahs and they're taking hadiths in which things like this are mentioned, and they're just using those words trying to hide this matter. They'll say, for example, istawa bidhatihi, which means that he is actually above, wal-'iyadhu billah. And they'll say things like istawa haqiqatan, and so on. So how did this reach the Hanbalis? Why is it that they were associated with Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal? The author, he says that one of the Sunni scholars, and you'll see the Wahhabiyya, they won't use the names of Sunni scholars. It's either with them, it's either Ibn Kathir or it's Al-Dhahabi, both students of Ibn Taymiyyah, or Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyyah. All three are students of Ibn Taymiyyah. These are those who they will use as a proof. So Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Kathir, likewise Al-Dhahabi, and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyyah, not Ibn al-Jawzi, that's Abu al-Faraj Abdul Rahman ibn al-Jawzi. He was a Sunni scholar. He was a real Hanbali Sunni scholar who defended Imam Ahmad. This one is Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyyah. So these ones, as well as the ones in our day, Al-Albani, Salih al-Fawzan, and so on. There are many that they will use. So Taqiyuddin Abu Bakr al-Hisni al-Dimashqi, this scholar, you remember his name as Taqiyuddin al-Hisni. He didn't meet Ibn Taymiyyah, but he, the Sunni scholar, because he was so angry at what Ibn Taymiyyah did in projecting these beliefs, like the belief of saying that in the night, wal-'iyadhu billah, Allah gets heavy on the arsh, and so the angels fall down to their knees because Allah is really heavy in the night. So he spread these things, Ibn Taymiyyah. This is why Taqiyuddin al-Hisni used to say, dulluni ala qabri. Show me where his grave is, I will pull him out and burn his corpse. This Sunni scholar used to say this. Taqiyuddin al-Hisni. He said in his book, دفع شبهة من شبه وتمرد ونسب ذلك إلى الإمام أحمد. He said in this book, فهذا شأن أهل الزيغ, that this is the way of the people of misguidance. واستمر الأمر على ذلك إلا أنهم سلكوا مسلك المكر والحيلة, that these people, they continued in the way that they were, but they used deception. He said, في زمن الإمام أحمد, in the time of Al-Imam Ahmad, there was a person who was known as Muhammad ibn al-Karram, or Muhammad ibn Karram Muhammad ibn al-Karram. He said, وَنَبَغَ فِي زَمَنِ الإمام أحمد محمد بن كرام السجستاني. He appeared, Muhammad ibn Karram. وترافق مع الإمام أحمد, and he was like a student of Imam Ahmad, and also someone who was one of his peers, learning with him, going to the different gatherings of hadith. وأظهر حسن الطريقة حتى وثقه هو, and he showed himself to be good, and until such that Imam Ahmad himself considered Muhammad ibn Karram trustworthy. But then later on, sometimes things that are lurking deep in the heart, a lot of the time due to jealousy, and we've seen a lot of this, due to jealousy, due to keeping a grudge, sometimes some students of knowledge, they go astray because of this. Time and time again, we've seen this in our times, never mind in the past. So he said that Imam Ahmad considered him trustworthy. وابن عيينة, also this big scholar. وسمع الحديث الكثير, he sat in, Muhammad ibn Karram sat in many gatherings of hadith. وأظهر التقشف. التقشف is to make manifest simple living. He was, he was very ascetic. يعني كان أظهر الزهد. He was very broken away from life. He was very detached from the world. مع العفة ولين الجانب, وَكَانَ مَلْبُوسُهُ جِلْدَ الضَّأْنِ. He would wear wool. So he would live a very simple life. غَيْرَ مَخِيطٍ. It wasn't even stitched. وَعَلَى رَأْسِهِ قَلَنْسُوَةٌ بَيْضَاء. Muhammad ibn Karram, he used to wear on his head a white hat. ثُمَّ أَخَذَ حَانُوتًا. Then he purchased a shop. يَبِيعُ فِيهِ لَبَنًا. He started to sell milk. And so on. وَاتَّخَذَ قِطْعَةَ ثَرْوٍ. He purchased for himself like some fur, and he would sit on it. كان يعظ الناس ويحدثهم حتى أخذ بقلوب العوام والضعفاء من الطلبة. Until those that were weak around him, he took their hearts, because they saw him in this simple manner. Like some of the Yemenis say, ظاهره مسكين. His outside he's a miskin, he's a faqir, poor guy. وباطنه سكين. But inside he's like a knife. He's sharp, he's dangerous. So فإذا هم 70,000. They became 70,000 people in and around Baghdad that followed him. During the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, 70,000 people supporting Muhammad ibn Karram. وَكَانَ مِنْ غُلَاةِ الْمُشَبِّهَةِ. And he was one of the extreme, one of the exaggerative مشبهة. وصار يلقي على العوام الآيات المتشابهة والأخبار التي ظواهرها يوافق عقولهم وما ألفوه. That he would present to people these muhkam ayahs, these mutashabih ayahs, the ayahs in which if taken with their apparent meanings, a person would be misguided. Like, for example, istawa, to say it means above or sit, and so on. So he would give these to the lay people, and he would explain. He would give it to them without explanation, and they would imagine them to be like their own attributes, things that hum alifuhu, things that they got used to, they were already used to. فَفَطِنَ الْحُذَّاقُ مِنَ الْعُلَمَاءِ. And then the scholars that were very intelligent, they realized what's going on. فَأَخَذُوهُ وَوَضَعُوهُ فِي السِّجْنِ. They took Muhammad Karram and they put him in prison. فَلَبِثَ فِي سِجْنِ نَيْسَابُورِ 8 سِنِينَ. So in Iran, in the city of Naysabur, which is originally Nishapur, they put him in there and he remained there for 8 years. And then he goes on speaking about Muhammad ibn Karram and how those supporters of his remained, and they kept spreading his belief in tashbih, spreading his belief that Allah is like the creation, and so on and so forth. And so Ibn Taymiyyah was not the first among these people. Just to recap on something as well, I put together what the Wahhabiyah do and what those Mujassimah did some 1,200 years ago is that they take ayahs of the Quran and they take the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which the attributes of Allah are mentioned, or in which things are attributed to Allah. And then they say to them that we take them literally. There was a person recently who was indirectly addressing me or responding to something that I had said, and he was talking to some people, and he said that yes, we believe that all these attributes that are attributed to Allah, we take them with their literal meaning. He said we don't take them with their metaphorical meaning, we take them with the literal and with the apparent meaning. So he was talking about al-istiwa, istawa, and he said it means above. Nowadays, some of these Wahhabiyah, they moved away from saying sitting. They moved away from saying sitting and they just say above. Even then, it's still not permissible. But let me give you some examples. I gathered really quickly 5 examples from the Quran. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned, تجري بأعيننا. تجري بأعيننا. If taken literally, this would mean the ship or the ark sailed by our eyes. That's if it's translated literally. And it's not permissible to translate it literally. The Wahhabiyah and the Mujassima, the anthropomorphists, will say, you've got to take it literally. So they'd say that it sailed, the Ark of Nuh sailed with the eyes of Allah. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So they'll say we have to take it literally. They'll say the ayah, بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبَسُوطَةً. The Wahhabiyah will translate this literally. And they will say, rather, his two hands are outstretched. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. They will say, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ. Your Lord will come. Like to move from one place to another, to come. These are three ayahs. They say, وَيَبَقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ. They'll say, wajh. You've got to say that the face of Allah remains. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And also, there are other ayahs. In the hadith, and all of these, what did Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah do? What did the scholars among the Asha'ira and among Al-Maturidiyya do? Some of them said, we believe in the word in Arabic that Allah revealed in Arabic. We believe in it bila kayf, without giving it a manner of being. I saw some of them using this word modality, meaning to have a how. So without attributing a manner of being to Allah, we just believe in the word and that's it. Some of them said, no, we give it a meaning which is other than the apparent meaning. These are the two valid schools of Ahlul Sunnah. And the Salaf, as-Salih, among them there were those that did the first, where they just said, we believe in them and we know, and we say Allah knows best what they mean. And also among the Salaf, as-Salih, the Salaf, were people, scholars, who actually interpreted them, like Ibn Abbas and others. Among the hadith, which are mutashabih, there is the saying of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, kilta yadayhi yamin. If taken literally as the Wahhabiyya do, they'd say both his hands are right hands. Kilta yadayhi yamin. You see, when we mention in Arabic, even when I say in Arabic, I just say it as it is, because that's what was revealed. I say kilta yadayhi yamin. Ja'a rabbuk. Tajri bi a'yunina. This is what Allah revealed. This is what we believe. But when we give the meaning, we give it an appropriate meaning. What did the Wahhabiyya do? They translate it literally, which means that they attribute the attributes of the creation to Allah. Also, ضَحِكَ اللَّهُ اللَّيْلَةَ. This is in the hadith. It means that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala had mercy. They would say Allah laughed that night. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam mentioned in a hadith narrated by Al-Bukhari, ضَحِكَ اللَّهُ اللَّيْلَةَ, which means Rahim Allah. Allah had rahmah. Likewise, عَجِبَ اللَّهُ اللَّيْلَةَ. It's in a narration. The Wahhabiyah would take it literally because it relates to the attributes of Allah. They'd say Allah was amazed on that night. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. Likewise, in the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, in which Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned, so it's a hadith Qudsi, that the most accepted things to Allah are the obligatory matters. And that's how a slave would gain a higher rank, by performing the obligations. And if he comes a handspan's worth, and so on. Allah would create a power with an ability within this person's hands. And in the hadith it mentions, Man atani yamshi, that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala revealed in this hadith, that whoever comes to me, literally, if it was taken literally, whoever comes to me walking, ataytuhu harwalatan. The Wahhabiyya take this literally. Harwala means to jog. So they would say, whoever goes to Allah walking, Allah will jog to him, Allah will run to him. Wal-'ayadhu billah. What did Ahl Sunnah say about the word harwala? They said, sifatun azaliyatun abadiyatun lillah. It is an attribute of Allah that is eternal and everlasting. And some of the scholars said, well, Allahu a'lam what it means, but obviously it doesn't mean running. And some of them, they gave it a meaning. Inna Allah khalaqa Adama ala suratihi. The Wahhabiyya would say, indeed, Allah created Adam in his own image. Taking it literally, referring to Allah, wal-'ayadhu billah, attributing an image to Allah. Ahl Sunnah didn't say that. Likewise, there is a hadith, بَيْنَ إِصْبَعَيْنِ مِنْ أَصَابِعِ الرَّحْمَنِ. If taken literally, it would mean between, they would say it means between two of the fingers among the fingers of Ar-Rahman, of Allah. A'udhu billah. Likewise, يَضَعُ الْجَبَّارُ فِيهِ قَدَمَهُ. This is talking about hellfire. The Wahhabiyya would say that Allah puts his foot, his qadam, on the fire of hell. فَتَقُولُ جَهَنَّمْ قَطٍ قَطٍ. And then the fire of hell would say, enough, enough. All of these things that are attributed to Allah, Ahlus Sunnah interpret them. Or Ahlus Sunnah say, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ Allahu a'lamu bima'nahu amirruhu kama ja'a. Allah knows best what these things mean. Just as they came, say them in Arabic and believe that Allah knows best what they mean. And likewise, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. They're not like the attributes of the creation. But what it doesn't mean is such and such. This is what some of Ahl Sunnah said about all of these matters. And some of them, no, they gave them a meaning. They interpreted them. So this is what we are speaking about when it comes to, this is what we are referring to when it comes to the Wahhabiyya, the Mushabbiha of today. This is the problem that we face with them. They call us kuffar because we do not take the literal meaning. They say, you don't believe in what Allah revealed, you're giving your own meanings. This is why they call us kuffar. So one of the scholars, whose name was Abdul Rahim al-Qushayri, Abu Nasr Abdul Rahim al-Qushayri. He is the famous son of the famous Abdul Karim al-Qushayri. Abu al-Qasim Abdul Karim al-Qushayri. He is buried in Misr, in Egypt. And he is mostly known for Al-Risala al-Qushayriya, which is a book that he wrote about as-Sufiyya, about Sufism. And it's a very, very popular book, mashallah. It's a very, very beneficial book also for those who have learned. A book like it in the Indian subcontinent that was authored was by Al-Jullabi, a book that is known as Kashful Mahjub, written in the Persian language, then translated into other languages. It's full of aqidah, of al-aqidah, the creed of the Maturidis, of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So Abu Nasr al-Qushayri, he was very, very active in warning against the Mushabbiha in his time. So Abu Nasr al-Qushayri died in the year 514 after Hijrah. He is the one whom Al-Hafiz Abdul Rahman al-Tabasi described as Imam al-A'immah, the Imam of the Imams. This saying that Al-Hafiz Abdul Razak al-Tabasi said about Abu Nasr al-Qushayri that he is at his time Imam al-A'imma, the Imam of the Imams, like a big scholar, the scholar of the scholars. It was narrated by Al-Hafiz Ibn Asakir in his book Tabyinu Kadhib al-Muftari. This Ibn Asakir is not the Ibn Asakir that used to teach Aqidat Ibn Asakir. He's not the same one. This is his uncle. The uncle was a Hafiz who wrote a book defending the creed of the Ash'aris. He called it Tabyinu Kadhib al-Muftari, making clear, clarifying the lies and the slander of the slanderers against Abil Hasan al-Ash'ari. So this is to speak about who Abu Nasr al-Qushayri is. Likewise, the muhaddith, the linguist, the Hanafi scholar, Murtada al-Zabidi, said in his commentary of Ihya Ulumuddin, which is called Ithafu Sadat al-Muttaqin, he is the one that conveyed what Abu Nasr al-Qushayri said. But just to give you a little bit more of a background on Abu Nasr al-Qushayri. Ibn al-Athir, so you have two. You have Ibn Kathir, who is a direct student of Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Kathir, like a lot. Ibn Kathir. Then you have Ibn al-Athir. Ibn al-Athir, he's the second one. He was an Ash'ari scholar. Both Ibn Kathir and Ibn al-Athir wrote books in history. Ibn Kathir wrote a book, Al-Bidayah wa Nihayah, the beginning and the end. And Ibn al-Athir wrote a book known as Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh. Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh. So he says in Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, in the events of the year 469. So we said that Al-Qushayri, the son, passed away in 514. In 469, so some 30, 40 or so years before, in this year, what happened? ورد بغداد أبو نصر ابن الأستاذ أبي القاسم القشيري حاجا, that the son of Al-Qushayri, the Ustadh, his son, Abu Nasr, who we're going to talk about, he passed by Baghdad in Al-Iraq at this time, and he was intending to go to Al-Hajj. وجلس في المدرسة النظامية, and he sat in this famous school called An-Nizamiyya, which is, and he was actually, he was alive at the time, Nizamul Mulk. He was actually alive at that time, after whom this big madrasa is known. And what happened here was, he said, وَجَرَى لَهُ مَعَ الْحَنَابِلَةِ فِتَنٌ, and that when he came, there was a lot of fitna between him and the Hanabila. Hanabila meaning the Hanbalis, but not meaning the ones from Ahl Sunnah, the ones who had gone astray. So a lot of the times they say fitnatul Hanabila, the fitna, the corruption of the Hanabila, they mean those. Nowadays, if some of the people from the past were alive, they'd call the Wahhabiyya probably Hanabila. So جرى له مع الحنابلة فتن لأنه تكلم على مذهب الأشعري ونصره. So those people then, the anthropomorphists of that time, they were agitated because Abu Nasr came and he spoke and praised Al-Ash'ari. praised the Sunni creed. وَجَرَتْ بَيْنَ الطَّائِفَتَيْنِ أُمُورٌ عَظِيمَةٌ. And there was great corruption that occurred. فَلَمَّا فَرَغَ مِنْ تَحْصِيلِ الْفِقْهِ تَأَهَّبَ لِلْخُرُوجِ إِلَى الْحَجِّ. When he completed his learning, in one sense, he went to Al-Hajj. وَحِينَ وَصَلَ إِلَى بَغْدَادَ. And when he got to Baghdad, وَعَقَدَ الْمَجْلِسِ. وَرَأَى, and he gathered with people there, and they sat in his gatherings. وَرَأَى أَهْلُ بَغْدَادَ فَضْلَهُ وَكَمَالَهُ. And the people of Baghdad saw how honorable he is, and they saw how strong he is. وَعَايَنُوا خِصَالَهُ بَدَى لَهُ مِنَ الْقَبُولِ عِنْدَهُمْ مَا لَمْ يُعْهَدْ مِثْلُهُ لِأَحَدٍ قَبْلَهُ. That they accepted him wholeheartedly, in such a way that there hadn't been a person for a long time who they had accepted, like Abu Nasr al-Qushayri. And other scholars, they remained with him. And anyway, cutting a long story short, there were many people that died on this trip. There are many people that died on this particular trip because of Abu Nasr making very clear that Allah Ta'ala is not to be attributed with the attributes that the so-called Hanabila at that time were attributing to him. Just to mention one last matter here. One of the scholars mentioned that when he went to Baghdad, when he got to Baghdad, Abu Nasr al-Qushayri, the people who were amongst the Mujassima, many of them embraced al-Islam upon his hands. Many of them embraced al-Islam. But there were some that were absolutely adamant on their belief. وَأَبَوْا. They rejected the Ash'ari creed. إِلَّا التَّصْرِيحِ. وَأَبَوْا إِلَّا التَّصْرِيحِ. They refused except to be explicit with their beliefs, which are what? بِأَنَّ الْمَعْبُودَ ذُو قَدَمٍ. That the so-called Lord that they worship has a foot. وَأَضْرَاسِ. Adras means teeth. وَلَهَوَاتِ. Lahawat, I don't know what they call it in English. You know there's this thing in the mouth here that moves around over here? What is that called in English? You know, over here. Just over here, it moves around like this. Sometimes, if you remember from the Tom and Jerry days, when someone screams or a cartoon character screams, they have this thing moving around. Anyway, they believe that Allah has this, or has a number of these. وَأَنَامِلْ, and tips of the fingers. وَأَنَّهُ يَنْزِلُ بِذَاتِهِ, and that he comes down. وَيَتَرَدَّدُ عَلَى حِمَارٍ, and that he sits on a donkey. فِي صُورَةِ شَابٍ أَمْرَدٍ, that he sits on a donkey in the form of a beardless youngster. بِشَعَرٍ قَطَطٍ, with hair that's not absolutely straight and not absolutely curly, in between. وَعَلَيْهِ تَاجٌ يَلْمَعُ, that on his head is a crown that gleams. وَفِي رِجْلَيْهِ نَعْلَانِ مِنْ ذَهَبٍ, and on his feet he is wearing 2 sandals made of gold. So they expressed all of this to Abu Nasr al-Qushayri. This is where it reached with them. They claimed that this is what is revealed in the texts. They took them literally, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. They took these texts literally and hence committed kufr. And to this day, the Mujassima, they say this. The people who liken Allah to the creation, they say Allah revealed certain matters, so we take them literally. Among them is that they say Allah sits or is above. So Abu Nasr al-Qushayri, he starts to talk about these matters. And he goes into a lot of detail. So you've got a bit of background of what kind of a person he was. He was very strict with the Mushabbiha. He said, addressing the people, and I wanted to also show you This is a book that I've been talking about for a long time. Do you remember when I used to say Al-Ghazali and Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi saying? So Al-Ghazali, he authored a book called, forgot myself, Ihya Ulum ad-Din, a revival of the religious sciences. And he wrote it in many volumes. This is Al-Ghazali. Then this book was explained by Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi, born in India, moved to Al-Yaman where he studied, then eventually went to Egypt. He also got married and then he passed away in Egypt. So he wrote an explanation to the book of Al-Ghazali, Ihya Ulum ad-Din. This commentary of the scholar that we've just been describing that went to Baghdad, Abu Nasr al-Qushayri, his books have been lost. His books were lost. When Genghis Khan attacked Baghdad and threw all of the Islamic libraries and the books into the river, into the Tigris, Dijla, and the water became black because of the ink of the books. Many of these books were lost. It's thought that maybe his book was in one. His books, copies of these manuscripts were there too. So the books of Abu Nasr al-Qushayri, especially this one, At-Tadhkiratu al-Sharqiyya, has been lost. Except that scholars copied certain parts of it into their books, like Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi. In his explanation of Ihya Ulum ad-Din, he copied some of the words, some of actually pages from the book of Abu Nasr al-Qushayri, where Abu Nasr spoke about this matter of people likening Allah to the creation. How they use the Arabic words, but actually inside their hearts they believe Allah to be like the creation. And they claim that they're following Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal in that. But Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal said, Man qala Allahu jismun la kal ajsam kafar. The one who says Allah is a body, that's kufr. Even if he says after it, not like other bodies, it's still kufr. So this tells us that you could put any word there and know that Al-Imam Ahmad considers it to be kufr if attributed to Allah. Like saying, like if somebody was to say, Allah sits, but not like we sit. He said Allah sits, kafir. Or like to say, Allah, if someone said, Allah has a hand, but not like our hands, just by saying Allah has a hand, this is kufr. Like if someone said, Allah laughs, but not like we laugh, just by saying Allah laughs, this is kufr. Because laughing only occurs in the creation. Allah created laughing for the creation. So it's important that this is understood. And this is Al-Imam Ahmad who they are claiming. They say, we follow Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Ahmad said, مَهْمَا تَصَوَّرْتَ بِبَالِكَ فَاللَّهُ بِخِلَافِ ذَلِكَ. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is not like that. He also said, مَنْ قَالَ اللَّهُ جِسْمٌ لَا كَالْأَجْسَامِ كَفَرْ. Whoever says Allah is a body, but not like we are bodies, then still this is kufr for having attributed this word to Allah. He said about istawa, that the Wahhabis say means sitting or being above. He said, istawa kama akhbar, la kama yakhturu lil bashar. Allah istawa, this is attributed to him, istawa, just as Allah revealed. Allah revealed the word istawa, we believe in the word istawa. La kama yakhturu lil bashar, not like what a bashar, a human would imagine. So there's no modality, there's no how-ness, there's no manner of being. Manner of being means like this or like that. Yellow, blue, big, small, tall, short, rough, smooth, hot, cold. This is the answer to how. This is the answer to, this is, for example, how you would say something has a manner of being. Allah is not attributed with that. So these words that are revealed in the Quran, that one of their meanings is one of their meanings is hand or face, or we can't use these for Allah. Instead of saying the word hand, because that's inappropriate, we say, for example, the power of Allah. Instead of saying, for example, ضحك Allah, that Allah laughs, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, we say it means mercy, like the scholars said before us. They explained this issue. So this is a very important matter to grasp and understand. If a person wants to know the difference between a Sunni, a Muslim, and a Wahhabi, then this is the core matter. That they read the Quran differently. And they are hypocrites also in the sense that they say anything that comes in the Quran or in the Hadith about Allah, you have to take it literally. As for everything else, they don't take it literally. Why, when it comes to Allah, you take it literally? And that causes their interpretation, causes contradictions in the Quran. The atheists and those people that hate Islam, they, if they knew about some of these matters, how the Wahhabiyya take things literally, they would have, according to them, so much fun with the Wahhabis. And believing them to be the face of Islam, they would say, what kind of a religion is this? Where the book is contradictory based on the literal interpretations of the Wahhabiyya, they would make the Quran contradictory. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned, لَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Had the Quran been from other than Allah, had it not been from Allah, then people would have found many contradictions in it. Now the Wahhabiyya, they take it literally, and through that, they make it contradictory. And Allah mentions there is no contradiction in the Quran. So what are they doing? وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So we'll go through, inshaAllah, next time, after we've got this background about Abu Nasr al-Qushayri, and we understand him a little better. We will go through, inshaAllah, next week, his saying. And he completely dismantled the argument of al-Mujassima, those who liken Allah to the creation. Do you remember, lastly, we'll have one question. Do you remember, lastly, what we also call the Mujassima? There's another word in Arabic. We heard it from that side. What about this side? No? With a ha and a sha. Yeah, Hashawiyya. You say Hashawiyya and Hashwiyya. You can say both. Okay. Are there any questions up to there? Let's say La ilaha illallah and as-salah ala nabi. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim.